Hello and welcome to this tutorial on Synesa eDromos. So in this tutorial we'll be going over creating a new project, creating a new data source and creating a new data configuration. I'll be going over each of these in more detail once we get to them in the tutorial. For now, let's just jump onto eDromos, and as eDromos tells us, we have so far no projects and we'll need to create one to start using eDromos. We'll do that by clicking on the Add New Project button here. So projects are a structure meant to organize your datasets and your configurations. Each project can contain its own datasets, its own configurations, so that you don't have to have all your datasets and your configurations in one single pile, but you can put them in projects according to which ones of them are related to each other, right? For this project, we'll just be calling it demo. We can also give it a description if we want to. This can be useful if you're like working with other people or such, and you want to describe the project to someone who's not seen it before, or even if you want to describe it for yourself in case you forget or something. I'll just leave the description empty for now, and we click the Add Project button to create the project. Right? The view has changed now since we have a project. You can see from here we are inside projects and inside demo, the project we just made. And here we have the analysis configurations and the data sets of this project. So far they're both empty, and we'll start by creating new data sources, new data configurations inside here. If we want to make a new project, we can just click on the Add New Project and create it just in the way that we made the demo project, right? For now, let's just make a new data source. So we do that by clicking on going into the Data Management tab and clicking on the Add New Item button, and from there selecting Data Source. So a data source is a static, unchanging data set that eDromos saves into the database from a file. So the file formats accepted are CSV and Excel formats. CSV creates a single data source, and Excel formats create several if there are several sheets in the Excel file, right? We'll just use a CSV for now. We start by selecting a file, and here I have a cerebrovascular disease demo CSV. I'll select that one, and it opens this view right here. So what this does is it describes each of the columns in the data source in the CSV file. So the file itself looks something like this. We have the header row and then rows of data, and we'll have to configure this to tell eDromos in what format it's saved into the database. The default data type for each column, the data format, is text, but we'll need to tell if some of the columns are for example dates, integers, decimal numbers, so on. And we'll do this by just clicking on the data type and selecting from the menu. So start time, end time, clearly they are date times, so we'll select date from the data type menu for them. We also have a cost column that will be a decimal number, even though the examples here seem to be integers. And we have age, start of year, and we'll make that one an integer column. And before we can create our data source, we also have to name it. Let's call this one CVD, since it's about cerebrovascular disease, and click Import Data. When you click Import Data, eDromos saves the data into the database and creates us a new data source. Right? Now we want to create a data configuration. Again, we are in the Data Management tab. We click Add New Item and go to Data Configuration. Right. So data configurations are a non-static, dynamically modifiable form of data. So these are the actual datasets we use for analysis purposes. And they combine data from different data sources. And we can also filter them, change the perspective on them, use them more dynamically. They are not just data saved in the database, but they are created based on the configuration, right? We'll start by choosing a main data source. So this is the data source that the data configuration is built around. So later on we can add columns, we can add rows, but we have to have one data source as this sort of structure on which we are building the data configuration. And since we only have the one we just created, the CVD data source, we'll select that one. We'll also want to give our data configuration a name. And here, since we're only using the one source, I'll call it CVD data conf. And click Save Configuration to save the configuration. Unlike data sources, this doesn't directly put us back in the main project menu, but we have more configuration to do. This is very similar to what we just saw in the data source creation. Here we are not telling the format in which these are saved into the database, but rather the perspective from which we are examining this dataset in eDromos, right? So we'll need to tell eDromos the data types for process mining. In a process, the important data types are ID, activity, and start time. Why are these important? Well, we need to know what is the entity that moves through the process. So in this one is the patient moving through the process. We'll need to know what happens to that patient in the process, so the activity, and we need to know when it happens so that we can know in what order the events take place, right? And we do this by choosing the data type. For this data, we want to make the patient be the ID. This is the patient identifier, so we'll choose the ID for this column. We want to know which events take place in the process, so we'll choose event as activity. And we want to know when this happens, so start time, we'll choose that as start time. We also have additional columns here that we can utilize. So we have the end time as well. We can choose that as end time, so we can see the durations of the events in the analysis. And we have a cost column, so we can choose that as cost. We can see the cumulative cost over the process, so on. Now this data configuration is basically ready. In other tutorials, we'll go over these import rows, import columns, add new column, filters, and so on. But for now, we'll just want to create the data configuration, and we do that by clicking on the Apply Changes button. And there we go. We've created a project, a data source, and a data configuration. That's it for this tutorial. I hope to see you in the next ones too. But for now, see you later.